I want to welcome everybody to our second annual, we hope becomes an annual event, Unite for Change. I want to thank you for coming out this morning to show your support for our students. And again, the purpose of our Unite for Change event is to demonstrate to our students that we all work together in Patterson, that all of the adults are here to support them. We know that there are many challenges teenagers face. Our youth face many of the same issues we did as young people, but they also have some new challenges that we didn't have, and that's going to be the focus of our panel discussion this morning. So before we begin, I would like to recognize some individuals who are here with us. Dominic Farina from the Patterson City Council is here. Thank you, Dominic, for being here. From the Patterson Joint Unified School District Board of Trustees, we have Amanda Lozano and Kitty Ross here. And we also have from the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, our school resource officer, Deputy Christian Torres. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I know we still have some folks coming in. I'd next like to begin by introducing the panel this morning. And again, last year we held this event in the wake of the tragic school shooting in Parkland. Not only was there that horrible event, but across the country, in every community, literally in every state. I'm sorry, I missed Chi-Chi, and I had it written down here, Chi-Chi. Please give a round of applause to Chi-Chi Jack from our county Board of Education. And I would point out that both Chi-Chi and Kitty, who represent you on both our Patterson board and our county board, also have children in our school system. So thank you for being here. And again, thank you to all the parents and community members who are here to show your support. Did I miss anybody else? I don't know how I did that because I literally had it written down. So again, thank you for being here. This event started last year again in the wake of the Parkland shooting, but also in the wake of an incident that we had in Patterson that was happening all across the country. Students were scared and would repeat rumors of a threat, but repeated them in a way that wasn't very productive, which was on social media. And it got shared and shared and shared, and we took it seriously, and we had law enforcement involved. But as our friends in law enforcement like to say, we were chasing ghosts, because we didn't know who allegedly made the threat, when and where it was going to happen. And it turned out that it wasn't an actual threat. So we used that as an educational opportunity to remind students, remind parents the proper way to report any threat or concern of safety, which is face-to-face or phone-to-phone conversation, where we can identify either the potential victim or the potential suspect, and begin our investigation there rather than chasing down some anonymous source that went up and down on Instagram. And I will say from my perspective as a superintendent, that event had an impact because I'm not going to say it can't happen again, but we have not had one of those rumor incidents this year that resulted in kind of mass panic. So maybe there's something to be said about doing events like this where we bring people together, discuss the issues, hear the facts, and then form our opinions. So another issue that is facing our youth today is substance abuse. And again, this is not a new issue. This is not unique to Patterson. But in Patterson, we address issues openly and in the forefront. Discuss what the problems are, and hopefully come up with some possible solutions. One of the biggest changes that we're seeing is the delivery system for drug use, or particularly for legal products, or products that are legal for adults, which are cannabis. And that's going to be the focus of our discussion today. What are kind of the current trends in substance abuse among our youth? And what are some possible solutions? And what can we do to educate our community? And by that I mean our students, our parents, and our adult leaders within the school system. So I want to introduce each of our panel members who will be here. I'll answer a series of questions, or ask a series of questions of them, and then afterwards we're going to open it up to the audience. So our first panelist is Hamira Shabir. Hamira is a junior at Patterson High School, and she represents the Friday Night Live FNL Club. She's also a member of the debate club, the hiking club, ping pong club, academic decathlon, and tennis teams. Hamira would like the audience to know that though the risks may seem minimal now, in the future you'll feel the full consequences. Also, we have from Del Puerto High School, Natalie Garcia, who's in 11th grade and represents the FAST Club, which stands for Protecting Health and Slamming Tobacco. Natalie is also a member of the Bulldog Leadership Team and hopes today's audience will know to take care of your health and body because it is one of your most proud possessions. Also on our panel from Del Puerto is Sean Chavez, who represents the FAST Club as well. He'd like the Patterson community to know the effects of these substances. Savannah Lugo is a senior at Patterson High School and also representing FAST Club. Here pinch hitting for our assistant principal is Vince Lopez. Vince is our our school security supervisor. Prior to joining our team in 2014, he graduated from the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Academy and worked as security for the federal government beginning in 2008. Mr. Lopez also serves as our liaison to law enforcement, to County SARB, which is our Student Attendance Review Board, and he also works hand in hand with juvenile probation and our child welfare and attendance team here in Patterson. And like our two board members, he is also a parent of two students in our Patterson schools. Next, I'd like to introduce Jim Rakaitis. Jim is a prevention services consultant for Stanislaus Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. He's also a retired Modesto police detective with prior assignments in tactical patrol, SWAT, street gang unit, and alcoholic beverage control investigations. Currently, Jim also works as a liaison between Stanislaus BHRS and Patterson High School in coordinating our Life of a Tiger program. Mr. Rakaitis would like the audience to understand that misinformation about drugs and alcohol also puts our students at risk and limiting their true potential. By providing real, up-to-date information for our young people, they tend to make better decisions about that which affects their future. Next, I'd like to introduce Justin Danner. Justin is the store manager at the People's Remedy, which is a local cannabis dispensary. Justin has worked for over a decade with cannabis patients and was a former administrator for the homeless shelter here in Patterson. He's been a resident of Patterson for 7 years and has been a local business owner for 2 years. Justin would like members of the audience to know that the cannabis community are your neighbors and care deeply for our community. Also on our panel, we have Isaiah Rivera. Isaiah is the president of Creekside Associated Student Body. And we have Alondra Granados, who is with the FAST Club JV at Creekside Middle School. So as you can tell, we have an expert panel, and among those experts are some of our students who have studied this issue and are very involved in substance abuse prevention with our teens. So I'm going to ask each of our panel members some questions, and again, at the end, we'll have an opportunity for members of the audience to ask individual questions that maybe didn't get covered today. So this first question is for Hamira and Natalie. At what age did you first become aware of your peers consuming marijuana or other substances? And can you describe the types of substances and devices students are using?
Well, personally, it depends on your background because I used to live in Tracy and I went to Williams Middle School. And there I got exposed to marijuana and other drugs at the age of 6th grade. But here, when I moved in 6th grade again in the second semester, I realized that marijuana wasn't normalized until 7th grade. So essentially, it depends on your background, but for the majority of students, it's normalized by the end of middle school. Luckily here, there aren't many substances that teenagers use. It's mainly nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. But since there's so few substances, it's harder to detect them as they're hidden in multiple ways. For instance, many of you guys might not know about jewel pens or vape pens. These are little nicotine and marijuana dispensers that are disguised as USBs or regular pens. So even though there's less drugs and less hard drugs that we're using in our county, there's still a really hard problem of detecting them. Thank you.
Well, I became aware of my peers consuming marijuana or any other substances around the age of 13 to 14. It was honestly very common. You would see a lot of students like just going on regular days, like basis, talking about drugs just as like marijuana or drinking, which was very common. And some substances kids are using are wax pens, flavored vapes, and drinking alcoholic beverages. And a lot of these, like pens and drugs are like I don't know how do I explain this. They're hidden, you know, like they are very easily hidden from parents, which parents and school members don't really notice that they're using these. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is for Vince and Deputy Torres, if you'd like to contribute as well. Can you tell us how often you address issues related to substance abuse with youth, and how, from your perspective, things have changed over the past 20 years with substance abuse among teenagers?
All right, so I go to all the schools. Kevin is of course is at Patterson High School. I don't have an exact number of what I can give you, but some days it's none. Some days it could be 5 or 6 times a day. So if I had to kind of estimate, I would say on a daily basis we deal with at least one issue of some type of narcotic. Over the 20 years, I've been with the school district for 5, federal government for a number of years, and then of course growing up as a kid. Back in the day, a lot of us are my age, you know, you saw marijuana joints, you saw a pipe, you saw somebody use a can, you saw apples. It's not like that anymore. If you get a chance before you leave today, there's displays up here against the back wall. Come and take a look at these vape pens that the kids are using now. They're easy to hide. When they smoke out of them, the smoke is really quick. It's just a quick little of smoke and then it's gone. There's not a strong odor to it. You know, that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing still a little bit of marijuana, but not as much as we used to because of the vape pens. These vape pens, they come in different percentages of how high the THC is in them. So some of the stuff they buy these cartridges, and these cartridges, they're supposed to last like 30 days. And these kids are getting these high percentage cartridges of these vape pens, and they're smoking them in a day or two. And it's really messing them up. We've had some pretty serious cases of kids that are smoking too much. I mean, I'm waiting for a day when somebody's gonna OD on this THC. It's just a matter of time. So anyway, that's about all I have to say. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, Vincent, most of the points. We're seeing more and more of the vape pen because of marijuana. You still have to roll it up, etc. The vape pen, you just hit in class and you're good. Per week, there's probably 2 or more, and I'm issuing citations. Try to minimize what's happening. Because beginning of the school year, we're trying to do the school lecture, suspensions. We noticed that trend's not working, so everyone caught with marijuana, we're issuing citations, and they might have to report to juvenile hall, probation, etc. So that's helping somewhat, but it's very common now. It's getting younger in the age group, and my patrol guys always call me about a student who's under the influence, and they're also having these edible marijuanas. Those are hard to test, but you can smell it. You can smell the marijuana. So that's about it.
So just a point of clarification, probably on average about 1 incident a day, and you focused on cannabis. So of those incidents with controlled substances, what percentage would you say is cannabis?
That percentage is really high. I could say alcohol we've come through a couple of times this year. I don't think I can recall any other substances, methamphetamine, cocaine, anything like that. I haven't come across any of that this year. But the vape pen stuff, I would say 99.9% of the time, we're looking at marijuana / vaping.
So I think we've got some district administrators here. It might be helpful, you've referenced kind of the delivery systems, and I know Justin's going to talk about this later. The vast majority of what we've taken from students is contraband. It's not licensed product in the state of California. And I know we're going to talk more about that later, but I think it might be, would you mind, Jeff, and if you would pick these cases up and just kind of take them around the room so people, it might be a little hard later just to come up and look at them. No opening the cases, they're confiscated, it's contraband. But when we reference this later, I think it will be good to know what it looks like. And again, from a policy standpoint, cannabis is legal in California for 21-year-olds, just like alcohol. What's different, though, is the items that we're taking from students are not, the vast majority are not legal state licensed products. And that was kind of shocking to us. So we'll take those around, but then we'll probably have some references to them later. So I think it's important that people see that. Our next question is for Isaiah and Humera. What are some of the perceptions that students have about marijuana or cannabis, and where do you think these ideas come from?
Well, I think that what they think about marijuana is they think it might help them in some way. And it just depends on the person. There's a lot of side effects that are not good for them, like depression and anxiety, changes in mood, suicidal thoughts in teens. So they don't think of this when they're about to try it for the first time or use it for multiple times. They don't think about that. They just think about them having fun with it, with their friends and partying, but that's not what it's about. It's about the bad things that can happen when they use it.
There's a lot of misconceptions that students have about marijuana usage. There's the idea, first off, that it's not harmful as other drugs, or it's not harmful, period. But this notion comes from the inability of us as teenagers who still have developing brains to make genuine decisions that are positive for us. We think that we see alcohol damage and people getting liver transplants. We don't see people getting transplants from marijuana, so we think that it's not as negative as other drugs. But this is just a founded fact. And then there's the idea that it's just a plant, but then again, the students still can't comprehend the consequences. There are poisonous plants out there. And then there's the other idea that it's not addictive at all. And people never talk about marijuana addiction because it's considered a plant and it's not harmful. But marijuana addiction is a problem that occurs often. And just because we don't see it as normalized as alcohol addiction or nicotine addiction doesn't mean that it's real. So students have a lot of misconceptions about marijuana, which motivates them to try it, thinking that it's not as negative as other drugs when it really is. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for Jim. Jim, what are some of the dangers of young people consuming these substances? And how does underage consumption differ from an adult who chooses to consume marijuana legally and responsibly?
Well, let me start by saying there has not been many longitudinal studies that have looked at exactly how young people are being affected and put in danger by the use of cannabis. And the reason being, federally, there has not been dollars available for long-term study. And if you're trying to use a substance and administer it to young people, you have an ethical problem. So anytime you're doing a study, you're already working with young people that have been using cannabis or using marijuana. So that being said, we're looking at trends and how things are dangerous. And we should all understand, if we're talking about tobacco or alcohol or any other drug, when we talk about young people, they're much more susceptible to problems because of brain development. So that's really what it comes down to. And I'll let Justin speak to this as well. I don't know of any case where somebody has actually overdosed and died from smoking weed. We know that that happens with alcohol. We know that happens with methamphetamine and cocaine and heroin and a plethora of other drugs. But there are no cannabis receptors in the brainstem. So if we tell young people, hey, don't smoke this, you can die, they're going to look around at all their friends and people that they know, and they're going to get on the internet and look, and they're going to see that people don't overdose and die. The danger comes with decision making. And so for most adults, when our brains are fully developed and we use responsibly, we tend to have the ability to make better decisions, even under the influence. But again, we're talking responsible use. With young people, I don't know that there's such a thing as responsible use. And that is strictly because of brain development. The age of 21 is there for a reason. It's not because we're mean and we don't want young people to have fun. Okay? It's because that brain isn't fully developed. And so we don't know that 10, 15 years down the road, 3-4 times a week usage by young people, we don't know what kind of risk that's going to put them in. But we already can tell by a lot of studies that it affects the decision making, it affects their ability to reach their full potential. There's a whole number of things that could happen. So I would say that somebody that is a young user or somebody that is a frequent user at a young age is in a much higher risk of causing permanent damage to their brain and having difficulty making good decisions. And we all know that if we make bad decisions, sometimes that puts us in a dangerous situation. So the substance itself may not cause death, but the resulting use can cause a lot of problems down the road. So looking at it that way, the difference between adults and students or young people using, I think like any substance, I'm not going to come in here and say that I'm anti-alcohol because I'm not, but I'm all about the responsible use of alcohol. And I think when our brains are fully developed and we go out and we have a couple beers with friends or we go out and have a glass or two of wine with dinner, it's probably not going to cause much of an issue. But for young people, I don't know that there is such a thing as responsible use. So we have to draw a very definitive line there. And the trouble that I've seen is as adults, we don't provide the education to our young people. We figure somebody else will do that for us. And we should understand that just say no doesn't work. Okay? It's going to work with a fifth grader because when you say just say no, they're going to go along with the program. Try it. Who here's a parent? Raise your hand. Right? Does just say no with your 14-year-old work? I don't care what the issue is. You have to explain why, because that's the next word out of, hey, don't do that. Why? And so education is the most valuable thing we have. And I think everybody up here on the panel would agree, and even people in the industry would agree, that we want to educate people that are out there using these substances. Okay? Tobacco hid a lot of the facts from the public. Alcohol hid a lot of facts from the public. And it's my opinion that if people in the cannabis industry get out ahead of what, could be potentially dangerous, and make sure that we're explaining to young people and people in our community what the dangers are and how to prevent problems, then we're way ahead of the game. Because I think if you give young people good factual information, they will make better decisions.
Thank you. Our next question is for three of our panel members, Savannah, Natalie, and Alondra. How are students getting access to these products, legal or illegal? And do you think the state's legalization has made it easier or more difficult for young people to gain access to these substances?
Most students are getting access to these products through fellow peers, like the kids that they go to school with. They see them on social media, Snapchat, Instagram, promoting what they have, and they're like, hit me up if you want to buy this. I'm gonna be having it at school, so it's pretty easy for them to gain access to it like that. And they also get it from family members, cousins, and stuff like that are older than them and that they can buy it legally. And I do believe that the state's legalization has made it easier for us to buy these products, just because they can go to family members who are older than them and have them buy it for them and give it to them. And I just do believe that it is easier.
Students get access to these products by older people on social media everywhere. There's honestly not a day where you can go on Snapchat, Instagram, and you see almost everybody down, all of who are your friends, posting things that they have these products, and it makes it super easy to get anything. Even if you don't want it, you still see it there. And I believe that the state legalization changed by making it easier, because a lot of the older people are getting it, and they're making money off of these younger kids who want to try all these new things, and they do it. And they sell their products with these younger kids. They're really open-minded of trying new things. So yeah, I really think that it did make it easier.
I think we missed Alondra, right? Alondra, you have a junior high school perspective. And I want to clarify too for our parents, all of these items here were taken at the high school within the last 2 years. Now that doesn't mean that every student who had paraphernalia in their possession was high at school. I don't want to mislead people. But I think it gives you an idea of the prevalence out there and the ease of access to these products. The other thing with vaping, and from an administrative standpoint, again, it's very hard to detect. As you can see, some of those devices are disguised as other things. It doesn't give off the smell or odor that those of us who are older remember with a pipe, a bong, or a joint. So it's a little bit different, a little bit harder to detect. So Alondra, what are your concerns? What do you see with junior high students?
What I see is that people usually get it from peers, I'm assuming, because I think some people I heard some people at school talk about it, and they're saying that you have to do this and that with the marijuana and that, and I'm just I'm assuming they're from peers. Yeah, I think they made it easier.
All right. Before I go on to our next question, which is for Justin, the other thing, and the reason I wanted those to circulate, we asked Justin to take a look at all of these confiscated items. And here's the shocking part to me. You saw the quantity, right? You saw how many items were there? All but 3 of those are illegal knockoffs. So they're not products that you would get in a dispensary licensed by the state of California. So that tells you that the students who are getting this stuff on the street, whether from a peer or in some cases we know from adults, is even more dangerous because they don't know what's in it. So Justin, can you describe the experience that an adult would have as a patron of your establishment? And what is the likeliness that your product may end up in the hands of young people? And are there steps in play to prevent this from happening?
Thank you, Clay. Yeah, there are, and so, our business has a very community-centric model of the way that we do things. We are all citizens of the Central Valley, we all live here, many of us have children here, and so we're also concerned about the safety of our young people and kind of how this is introduced to the community. And so, one of the things you'll notice if you ever come to our establishment, the first thing is when you walk into our front door, you'll notice that first of all, you're greeted by a receptionist and a security guard. We have security guards on staff all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But second of all, probably the most shocking thing you'll notice is you won't actually see any cannabis products. There's actually no product in what you'll see is more like what you would see at a doctor's office, like a front lobby in a doctor's office. So that we don't actually have any of that stuff out. There's no product that can actually be seen. So the next step is that you're actually asked to go to the receptionist and provide your ID. So we have to require that every person that comes into our establishment become a member of our collective. So you actually have to give us your ID, we have to scan and take a picture of your ID, and we have to verify that it's a valid government issued ID. We don't take any other IDs from anywhere else. And so that allows us to have some pretty strict safeguards on the people that we see and kind of their behavior, and so we can kind of mitigate what we do. And so in addition to having our security guards patrolling the parking lot to make sure that we're not having any of these issues where adults are coming in to buy products and taking them out and giving them to minors or other people in their vehicles. So we monitor that very closely. We also have cameras 24 hours a day around the building that also monitor that type of activity. So we're very careful about that kind of thing, and we actually have no problem, and have in the past in some of our other stores had to tell people that they're no longer willing to shop, no longer able to shop with us. If we see any of that type of behavior, we basically terminate their membership with our business, and they're no longer coming to our establishment. So we're trying to kind of put some safeguards in place to make sure that the people that are purchasing these products are purchasing them for themselves. The other thing, just kind of getting back to the process, once you are actually checked in and you become a member, then you're actually allowed into the room where the product is stored. The product in that room, though, is also not accessible. You can't grab it, you can't touch it, it's all behind glass, right? And so what we do is we actually have what we call a bud tender, and that person is actually assigned to work with each person to get specific about what the product is that they need, right? So in the course of doing this and asking these questions, hey, what are you using it for? Is it for sleep? Is it for, what are the issues that you're having? We can usually pick up on the people that aren't buying it for themselves. And so those are also the kinds of people that we start having those conversations with of, hey, this isn't for somebody else, is it? And we start pressing people about that kind of stuff. So we're, as a company, we're trying to have as many safeguards in place, everywhere from security to having cameras to our procedures as far as membership, to make sure that these products are going into the hands of responsible adults who are using them responsibly. It's also worth noting that every product in our shop leaves in a child-proof, tamper-resistant container. So it all has a seal. Some of them are very difficult even for myself to get into, much more difficult than a standard pill push and full pill bottle. A lot of these are quite difficult to get into, and they're tamper evident. So if anybody has opened them or gotten into them, it will be very obvious. So that's the other thing that we do to try to make sure that everything that leaves, even if it's inadvertently left in the hands of a minor or into the access of a minor, that it's much more difficult for those minors hopefully to get into those products. And now understanding that doesn't necessarily translate into the middle school, high school ages, because let's face it, if those kids want to get into things, they know where scissors are. But it definitely deters younger people, again, from accidentally getting into these products. And so I think our other processes are kind of what we use to try to make sure that the older kids aren't getting their hands on these products. And just to speak to what Jim was talking about, I would draw one distinct difference between responsible use for minors. And what I would encourage minors to do is, if you think that you're using cannabis for a medical reason, then you need to talk to your parents and your doctors about that medical reason, right? This needs to be something that's addressed the right way through the proper channels. You need to talk to adults in your life, talk to medical professionals in your life, and there are probably a lot of other things that you could be using than these street vaporizers to treat your medical conditions. Because the fact of the matter is I did go through all of these products, and they're not safe. There are no testing standards for any of these products that are bought on the streets. You have no idea what's even in those, and so that's a very dangerous thing to be putting these mystery things into your body.
So that would be the only instance that I would say that anybody underage should be using cannabis, is if you've gone through the proper channels and spoken to your doctor and your parents and you have approval from a medical physician to do so. Other than that, it should be, left to people who have fully developed frontal cortexes.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to combine the next two questions because they're really asking the same thing about marketing. I'm going to start with the students, and then I'm going to ask Justin to kind of weigh in on this. And we'll use these examples here again to show you the difference. So, students, do you believe that there are cannabis products that are being specifically marketed to you and your peers, and if so, why? I'm going to ask that of Savannah and Sean, and then I'm also going to ask our two junior high students to maybe weigh in on that.
I do believe that these products are specifically being marketed to us just because, the cartridges, they put the side effects, of course, in on the box. The side effects are uplifted, happy, like none of that is something true. It does not make you happy, it does not uplift you. It honestly just makes you tired and sleepy, and that's enough, like they are being marketed to us. And then the flavors of them, all the fruity flavors, that is being marketed to us because, of course, us, we want it to taste good. We don't want it to taste nasty. So that's why I believe that it is being marketed to us.
Thank you.
I actually don't believe that they are specifically being marketed towards the younger people, mostly because I don't think it's legal, because marijuana products take after certain shapes, basic shapes, circles, squares, stuff like that. You can't have a marijuana product where it takes after a Sour Patch Kid, because I don't believe it's legal either. So, in my opinion, I don't believe they are specifically marketed towards me and my peers.
I do think that it's marketed towards us. They want us to try it, how it feels, that it's gonna taste good, to know the good things that it helps you, but it really doesn't. They're really just pulling us in.
I think they're really marketing to the younger people and our peers, because I went to a fast JV meeting and they showed us this video about little kids just looking at stuff that looked like candy, but they were really kind of drugs in them. And this girl said, "Ooh, this one smells like strawberry. Can we take this?" But they were really just drugs.
So students, thank you for your perception, and I want to point out, and this is what I expected, you heard two very different opinions about this. But remember what we talked about earlier with the distinction between state licensed cannabis products versus illegal products that are out on the streets. So Justin, from your perspective, what are kind of the differences and what should parents look out for? And again, we have these items here, so I'll bring them forward. Maybe you could, I keep dropping this, I'm sorry. Maybe you could start by telling us, again, of these items here, I think there were only 3 that were legal products possibly. What should a parent or a student look at or look for if they come across these things?
So there's a couple of distinct things that you can find that if the product has these things, you can tell that they're not legal licensed products. Number one is that they would be shaped, as some of the students mentioned, in fun shapes like bears, worms, all of those things. That is not legal by state of California standards. Nothing that we sell in our shops has any fun shapes. They're also not allowed to use words like candy, things like that may be appealing to children. So they're trying to work on the verbiage. You're also not allowed to use characters on any of your products. So if you ever see a product that has any kind of face on it, any kind of fun-looking fruity character, all of those are also non-licensed products. And so as of 2017, everything that is sold in licensed, in the licensed market is subject to these regulations. So they can only be things like square, as mentioned, squares, circles, triangles. They also cannot mimic well-established brands or products. So if you see something that looks kind of like a Skittles bag, but it looks funny, those things are also totally illegal in non-licensed products. And so we have the unfortunate disadvantage in California of having a very, very gray medical cannabis system that was in place and from about 1996 until about 2017. And so that has created many opportunities for people to create makeshift businesses in their garages and make these things and market them to people that they shouldn't be marketing them to. And so, there's going to be some serious enforcement that has to happen so that we can, strongly separate the licensed operators from the non-licensed operators. And you'll notice as you look at some of these products, so something like this is a perfect example, clearly trying to mimic like the sour warheads. It's literally the word warheads with a Z. This is totally illegal, and nothing like this should ever be sold in California. So this is kind of shocking to me. This, another example, things like these. These have, another thing that you'll notice on all tested product is that it should have a testing label on it. So it should tell you the THC count in milligrams, it should tell you the CBD count in milligrams, it should tell you whether or not it was tested for pesticides and mold, all of those types of things. And you'll notice these have nothing but a fun little government warning on there that tells you that you're supposed to be 21 to take it. So that would also be a non-licensed product. So that's another example. This is a perfect example. It's literally called Wheezy Wonka. It's a Willy Wonka knockoff. They got the same kind of W, the same kind of funky hat. Perfect example of a company trying to mimic another brand to appeal to young people, right? Literally taking a children's candy brand and putting it on cannabis. It's incredibly egregious. And then things like this, another perfect example. This it's called, what is it called? Screw carts, I guess they call it. And it's got like a screw character on it, with little eyes. And all of these things are clearly meant to be appealing to young people. And so this is definitely something that we combat on a daily basis. I have adults that bring these products into my shop. And you have these, and we have to have the conversation about the licensed market and the unlicensed market and the difference between what they're buying in the shops. And so this is definitely some things to look out for. If you see anything like this, definitely be alarmed, because whatever is in there is a true roll of the dice with your health.
So when our students had different opinions on this, they're actually both right. Illegal products do use cartoon characters, do use flavors, do use things that are obviously marketing towards children. Legal state licensed products that would be obtained in a state licensed dispensary would not. So that's an easy way for parents to tell the difference right off the bat. And then I do think we have one that we know is legal, and maybe we can talk about what that would look like, particularly on the back. And the label that you were referring to.
So the first thing you'll notice about this product is that there's a seal on the top that's been broken. So that's what I was talking about with tamper-evident seals, right? So once this product is open, you can no longer make this look like it hasn't been opened, right? So if someone's getting into it, it's very obvious. It's also fairly difficult to get into. But the main thing that you're looking for on these products is going to be this label here on the back. This label on the back is going to tell you everything about this product, from the THC percentage to CBD percentage, and it also has a unique identifying batch number on it. That batch number is tracked from the minute the plant is grown to whoever takes it, to whoever made it into this cartridge, to whoever sells it. It's tracked from minute one all the way to sale. And so that's the only way that you know that a product is coming from a licensed dispensary, because those labs will only work with licensed dispensaries. So these people don't have testing labels on their product because those labs will not work with them. So that's kind of one of the things to know, that one of the ways that you'll know that it's a licensed product. You'll also notice inside the container, they have these little childproof plastic things that actually contain the product inside it as well. So these are meant to be childproof chemicals. So that's the main difference, is that, as you can see, those products are all ones you could just open the box and start using them. These take a little bit more work to get into, and they also have some unique identifiers on the product itself to let you know that it is a licensed.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to direct to Jim. Jim, in your experience, how often are young people hospitalized or put through rehab as a result of consuming marijuana or cannabis products?
So if we talk about my experience, I'll admit that I'm almost 57 years old. And so I grew up in the late 60s, 70s, went to college in the 80s. And I can tell you, in the time when I was a young person, I never saw anybody hospitalized because they were smoking weed. Never, ever happened. I never saw anybody have to go through rehabilitation when I was a young person. And one of my very close friends, when we were in college, had to go into alcohol rehab because he was drinking alcohol 3-4 days a week. But it's different today. So hard numbers, I don't work in a hospital ER. I sent some information out to a couple of trauma nurses that I know, and I haven't heard back from them yet to track. But I pulled up some public health numbers, and we're looking between 2005 and 2016. So we're already a couple of years behind the curve here. But just in the state of California, among children 0 to 5 years of age, there's been a 1,613% increase in hospital emergency room visits due to cannabis. Now, that isn't 5-year-old kids going out and getting on the internet and buying these products that you're seeing here and deciding that they're going to get high today. That is a direct result of mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, whoever, leaving something on the coffee table. And if it looks like a piece of candy, a 5-year-old isn't going to ask, is this candy? Right? They're just going to eat it. So that's what we've seen in all the states that have legalized recreationally. But even back when, and Justin referred to 1996, when the Compassionate Care Act passed and these products have been available, if you're going to leave them out there, young kids are going to eat them. When you move into the 16 to 19 age category, we're looking at a 273% increase from 2005 to 2016. So those are kids that a little bit more maybe have the intent to use. And what we're seeing is, especially now that we're getting into, probably about 2015-16 forward, where we actually have psychotic breaks. And so when we look at how marijuana has changed over the years, stronger product can actually affect our young person and older people's brains, especially if you have a predisposition towards mental illness. So a direct number, I can't give you that. They're out there. I'm not going to go through and start reciting a bunch of numbers, but just understand that what we're seeing today is much different than what we saw 10 and 15 years ago. The other thing that I'll share with you is from Stanislaus Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, because we fund a lot of inpatient and outpatient treatment programs. Again, when I was growing up, I never saw anybody go into rehabilitation for the use of cannabis. Today, the #1 reason young people enter drug rehab is for marijuana usage. That should be shocking, okay? Because when I grew up, you'd see kids that were, maybe going into rehab for alcohol, and some for cocaine. And we know that adults in California, the #1 reason, anybody want to take a shot that they're in rehab? Not alcohol, methamphetamine, okay? Followed by alcohol. We're seeing an increase, in opioids, but the percentage is so much lower. It's very dangerous, and so it is a crisis. But I think just to understand that, for somebody my age who knows marijuana from back in the day and what that was all about, it's really hard to fathom that that's the main reason a lot of our young people are entering drug rehabilitation. It doesn't click. And so when the more you work, in this industry, the more you work in education, the more you work in law enforcement, you really start to see that. firsthand the difference, especially when you're an old guy like me, and you had experience from, you know, the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s and the first part of 2000s, and then you've seen this rise in the THC content. Again, for responsible use for an adult, most of our brains can handle that. But the more often we use, the more at risk we are. The younger that we use, the more risk we are. So again, education, I can't say it enough.
Thank you. I'm going to combine a couple of questions so that we have time for our audience to ask a few questions that maybe didn't get covered. So Natalie and Humera, first of all, do you know anyone who's experienced a negative side effect as a result of using marijuana or cannabis product? And knowing the risks or potential risks for young people, why do students decide to consume these substances? So what do you think is kind of driving that illegal use among folks who aren't 21?
I believe a lot of these teenagers and stuff are starting to use these things because it's a lot in social media, a lot of these famous people who like they admire, you see them driving their fast cars with a lot of money and they're always doing drugs, either if it is one thing or another. And they think that, oh, maybe if I start smoking, maybe I can end up like them. And it's a lot of influenced by a lot of famous people and a lot of teenagers who are like considered the cool kids and they see everybody doing. And that kind of influences a lot of the teenagers because they're very open-minded about trying new things. And they're okay with what they see everybody doing.
There's a disparity in the negative consequences that teenagers face when they take marijuana usage. For instance, I have a friend who, when she took marijuana for the first time, she saw a little boy following her around, and she never took it again because of the paranoia, which is kind of funny. But then there's cases of, at my school, at least one person had a seizure and had to be taken to the ER, and it was kind of traumatizing to see that up close. So it can be negative consequences that are funny, but then there's hardcore consequences. And I've heard a story about an acquaintance who, his best friend left for a year, and this acquaintance was addicted to marijuana and took it every single day. And when that best friend came back after that year, he didn't remember his best friend because the marijuana had affected his memory. And even though we are aware of these negative consequences, it's still hard to comprehend as teenagers. There's a statistic that if you start taking marijuana by like our age right now, and then by the time you're in your 20s, you'll have major memory loss. But that's something we can't fathom because that's 1/3 of our lifetime from now. And the reason why so many people are motivated to try marijuana in the first place is that it's something normalized through pop culture and through social media and through our surroundings. I know some people in my family that have taken marijuana and they don't seem to have negative consequences, but there's other kids that might not know people who take marijuana personally and they'll still listen to rap music or pop music that talks about drug usage in every other line. So essentially it's the issue that it's become very normalized and we can't see the negative consequences in the short term, we can only see it in the long term. And as teenagers, we're not the best decision makers. We're not thinking about what's gonna happen to us when we're 35. We're gonna think about how this drug is making us feel happy right now.
The next question I'm going to ask of Sean and Savannah, and I'm also going to ask Vince and Deputy Torres to weigh in because they have to do this as part of their job. So how should parents or adults address their children if they suspect or they catch their child using illegal controlled substances? What would be your advice?
I personally think that you should talk to your students or your kids. Don't like yell at them. Don't tell them that they're dumb for what they're doing. Ask them why they're doing it. What led them to do this? Like, is it the people they hang out with? Are they going through things that you don't know about? Definitely just don't yell at them because they can be going through things that you don't know about. I personally know people who do go through things and they say that these like products make them feel better at the moment because they don't have anybody to talk to and that's why they use them. So just talk to them, ask them why, and help them out.
Like Savannah said, definitely talk to your kids, your students. Try to relate with them. Try to understand what they're going through, or if they're going through anything. Definitely don't attack them in any way or yell at them. It's yeah. Don't just try to understand and relate with the students, your peers, your child.
Thank you, Sean. And I'm going to bring this down to the other end of the table.
Yeah, they brought up good points. Communicate with your kids, monitor social media. They have very good points. We don't know what they're going through, even though we want to be hard on them. Communicate with them, speak with them. Biggest thing I noticed is the communication. Even with the mental health issues I deal with, they don't want to talk to mom or dad because legally they could get spanked, but they don't want to. So they just do vape, marijuana, alcohol, etc. And if that's not working, monitor social medias. Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. That's where they're getting it from. It's no longer walking in the park and then see someone, hey, you want to buy this? And I know a parent who actually took the door off their room so they could see them. Just some ideas and communicate. Biggest thing is communication. Out of all majority of the 5150s or mental health holds I have is issues at home and they don't want to talk to anybody, family-wise. Communication.
All right, this is coming from a parent. I have a sophomore at the high school and I have a 7th grader at Creekside. Everybody's different with their kids. Everybody has different communication skills with their kids. I'm lucky enough and my wife are lucky enough that we have very good communication with our kids. So for me, if something like this was to happen, it would definitely be a sit down and talk. Definitely put out some information of what's happening with them. So I'm pretty lucky that way. I know a lot of parents aren't lucky that way, but if they can find a way to communicate with their kids in a loving manner, I think that's going to make a big difference in their life. Back in the day, I would have got whooped. I mean, no questions asked. It's not like that anymore. It's just not. And so, you know, just trying to have respect for what your kids are going through and try to have an understanding and some empathy, I think is going to go a long way.
Great, thank you. We now want to take questions from the audience for about 10 minutes. And I'll come to you first, but before we do that, I do want to recognize 2 other folks that are here, and I was remiss in not doing this at the beginning. You heard about Friday Night Live, you heard about the Fast Club. We are working very hard to educate our students about issues related to substance abuse and train them to be the leaders on these issues. So I want to recognize Graciela Tinoco, who's our student assistant specialist, if you would stand up, at Patterson High School. And from Del Puerto High School, we have James Hensley. And I'm going to embarrass James for a moment. James is also a finalist for County Teacher of the Year. So, great job, James. So I want to thank them for all the work that they do. Again, their role is to train our students to become leaders, to become educated on these issues, so that they make informed decisions not only as school children, but later as adults in life. So thank you for your work. We've got a question over here for the panel.
My question is, you mentioned that there's a rise in hospitalizations for taking marijuana. Yet in the olden days there wasn't. So what exactly was that again? That caused that? Like, I'm wondering if maybe it had to do with like maybe they were being laced, or maybe that the use of pesticides on them?
I think for like an acute reason to go, an acute reason to visit an emergency room probably wouldn't be from a pesticide. That's gonna be long-term health issues. And really you're not finding, it's pretty rare to find something that's laced. You know, growing up, we always talked about, oh, you know, you're smoking weed, somebody could have a PCP in there. It's very, very rare for somebody to mix drugs like that and sell it, especially for the same price that everybody else is selling something for. That being said, I mean, when you're looking at prescription medication that's, you know, counterfeit, I mean, we're seeing that there's fentanyl in there, but that's a whole another day's discussion. I think what you're seeing with the hospitalizations, it's the percentage of THC that's in the product. So back in the day when we'd see pictures of, you call them hippies maybe, at Woodstock dancing around kind of out of their mind, that's not because they were smoking weed. It was like 1% THC, very feel-good type of substance. It's probably because they're using LSD or something else. But when you start talking about, you know, the bud of the plant where all the cannabinoids are produced, you'd have maybe 3%, 4% THC in a product in the 80s, and that would be on the high side. Versus today, you have things that are, you know, 20+% just in the plant. Now when you're talking about extract, that becomes a very dangerous product, especially for a first-time user or a child under 5. We had some of the students talk about knowing friends that tried for the first time and extreme paranoia and almost psychotic reactions. So those are the things that are happening. They call them poisonings, but it's because of the strength of the drug. And I would submit that if you had something that's a 1-to-1 ratio that they got into CBD to THC, it was a very low percentage of THC, you wouldn't be seeing that because we never saw that back in the day. So the difference is the strength of the product. So I would say if we had very low access, we wouldn't see the hospitalizations. But we know that tobacco and alcohol, access is out there. And it takes a lot of work on behalf of adults to make sure that young people aren't having access to that. And I'm very impressed with what Justin has to say when you go into, you know, his establishment, all the hoops you have to jump to just to even be able to view the product. Does that hold true at the Mini Mart at the corner or at Save Mart or any of these other stores? They don't have those kinds of controls. We could go out when I worked ABC and we could send kids into a lot of these stores and they could buy booze with no problem. I'm betting that the majority of our stores that sell cannabis products, you can't send a 17-year-old kid there and have them buy. Okay, so that is in place for a reason. The problem always is the adults that have the product. Okay, and they have that accessibility to their children.
Can I kind of just jump off of that? So I kind of know what you're saying, and so what's happening is they're taking the marijuana and they're cooking the THC out of it, and they're making it into oil. Okay, and a lot of times what they do is they'll make edibles with that oil. So they'll make cookies, brownies, Rice Krispie treats, stuff like that. So say somebody cooks all this THC out, and now they're going to make Rice Krispie treats, and they're going to make a little square Rice Krispie treat, right? Okay, it's only meant to have a bite. Right? If you want to feel good, you're going to take one little bite of that. What's happening is these kids are eating the whole thing. And what we're seeing is the kid eats the whole thing, eats the whole Rice Krispie treat, eats the whole cookie, eats the whole brownie. They're out. They're not even responsive. I mean, we're calling 911 right off the bat. We're getting an ambulance there. So that's what's happening is that the THC level is so high when you cook it out of the marijuana and you put it into an edible or you put it into one of these little devices and you're smoking it, like I said earlier, some of these cartridges are meant to last 30 days. And you get somebody who smokes that whole cartridge in one day, that's gonna put them under. That's gonna, not under, but it's gonna put them in the hospital, is what it's gonna do. So I hope that answers your question of the THC, how that actually works. The difference between a marijuana bud and the actual oil that's coming out of the marijuana bud. Am I correct in saying that? Okay. All right.
And I would like to add to what Vince said too, from an administrative standpoint, and I want to reassure parents, we're doing all we can to make our schools safe. But you understand the dilemma now. In the old days, if a student walked into the bathroom and smoked a joint, you could smell it for 20 minutes and it usually followed him back to class, right? Very easy to detect. Vape pens are not, and edibles that would look like a brownie or come in a student's lunch, we're not going to notice that right off the bat. So we want to rely on you as well. If you hear from your students, hey, there's a kid we think has brought this stuff to school, call and report us. We do have the right to conduct a search. We have a lower threshold than our friends in law enforcement, right? We are the parent when your child is in school. That's the term in loco parentis. So if you hear anything, as we said last year, report it, let us know, and we will definitely follow up. Got one more question in the back here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Olivia Esquives Gonzalez, and I have a big concern. I think we need more forums of this to be able to discuss broadly, because it's a very delicate thing, and it's also need an effort from every single member of our community. Regardless if we don't have children in the school district, we have to work together, because Justin, I have to ask you a question. What is the process that you do to make your product available to the public between growing the plants and bringing the final product to your customers?
Very good question.
So it's important to note that our company doesn't actually grow the plant. We're just a retailer. But the way that it works is that each plant is given a unique identifying number from the moment it's grown. That plant then can only leave the facility it's grown in the hands of a state licensed distributor. And that state licensed distributor also has to log the information of all of the numbers to coincide with that plant. That distributor then can take the product to a manufacturer, someone that can then make it into something like these vaporizer pens or something like that, where the product is logged again.
Okay, when they take the product into the lab,
Yes.
Do you have acknowledgement of how they process the plant in order to get the truly substance that are medical?
How they process it? Yeah, so some different companies do different ones. The state has laid out 4 or 5 different processes that are legal to extract cannabinoids from cannabis. There is an ethanol extraction method, there are CO2 extraction methods, there are methods that involve butane. There are several different methods that companies can use to process them into those facilities, but those facilities are also subject to searching and
I have nothing
inspection.
personal against you, but I do have a lot of issues against this little source.
Sure.
Because, let's talk about Crow's Landing, the one that I live close by. If I go to the store that is near to the place where they're growing the plant, when you get into that store, immediately it's hard to breathe. Smell is so strong that it goes in here and it goes in here in my stomach, and I feel like I want to throw up. And there are some days when I'm going back from work, the smell is so strong that even in my car, I can breathe that strong smell that it makes me sick.
Wow.
And also, another different issue is a lot of people, when they're driving to get into that store, I'm coming from 5th Street, and then in order to get into Highway 33, there's a lot of people who are driving so crazy that they make U-turns desperately to get into that store. They're coming out, they're not even paying attention. So there's a lot of potential for accidents. There is a lot of potential for how can we know for sure if those adults are not purchasing to then sell it to young people?
Well, so that's sort of up to each individual business, and unfortunately out there in Crow's Landing, you are governed by the county, not by the city of Crow's. City of Crow's Landing doesn't technically exist. What I would encourage you to do, so each one of those issues sounds to me kind of like it's specific to that business. If anyone in this room ever has any of these issues with our business, I would love to hear that, and we would do everything that we can personally to try to mitigate those issues, including parking issues, smells, all of those kinds of things. We think we do a pretty good job of that, but every business is different, and some people have different priorities on what they put on their business. And so I would encourage you to go to a board of supervisors meeting and raise these concerns and say, listen, this is near my home, these are the issues I'm dealing with, this is not safe, and then kind of go from there and allow the process.
Just one last thing that I want to add to your comment, Natalie, that this business is also impacting negatively among our young people, because there is one, I don't know if any of you are familiar with La Reina de la Marihuana, the lady who is becoming multimillionaire doing this business. And she appeared like she is a heroine, and she is like to inspire other young people to get into this business to become immediately millionaires. That is leaving behind the efforts of people who go long years for education to gain their titles and their careers, and trying to inspire young people that that's not worth it, because this is better. You can make a lot of money in short time and making more profitable business.
Sure, and I would not argue that there are people in my industry that are irresponsible. Like every industry, there are people who are doing things like that are ethically immoral and irresponsible, and so it's up to us to try to set the standard for these businesses in our community. And so that's why we try to put in the processes that we have in our business to try to set us apart from those businesses and show the community how it can be done in a responsible way. I would encourage you don't have to buy anything. Any of you can come down at any time, check things out, walk around, talk to our security guards, our receptionists, and kind of get a feel for how our business works. And I think you might be a little surprised at not only the way we do business, but the demographic of people that shop with us.
I would also like to add, I was just at a county planning commission last night. Started at 6, I would say it ended close to 9 o'clock. And two of the items on the agenda were related to licensing of a dispensary in the Modesto area and a grow operation out here in Vernalis, which is very close to Rising Sun School. So I wanted to be there to hear, and I wasn't there in opposition, but I did express some concerns about safety measures at the grow facility near Rising Sun. And after the meeting, met with the owners and the managers of that to discuss it a little bit further. So that is your, those are your representatives. If it's a county issue, you'll want to contact your supervisor, Jim DiMartini. If it's within the city limits, your mayor or your council members or city manager to address any concerns with existing operations. And I think that engagement is important. Now, the voters spoke on this issue, and I view it as an educator the same I would alcohol. If we had an irresponsible liquor store selling alcohol to kids, we'd be all over that. And the licensing and the restrictions that are placed on these operations are pretty strict, from seed to finished product, including the grow operations. Now, whether individuals try and circumvent the law, that's where you need to get involved and say, hey, they're not doing it right at this place. And I know your representatives would want to hear from you. A couple more questions and then we're going to wrap it up.
Hi. This is a question more for you. I think this is amazing, what you guys are doing, and this is my second time attending. And my question is, can you further discuss, this is for educators, can you further discuss what you guys are doing at the school to educate the kids as well? And maybe can we hold more panels like this for the students? This is great for the parents, but what about the students? What exactly are we doing? And then for Justin, I think it's amazing that you're here educating all of us. You know, this has been an eye-opening experience for me as well. Is there a limit to how many times a consumer can come into your shop? A week, a month, or, you know, I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, so, there is, so it's, our limits are actually based on the amount of product you can buy within a day. So our computer system, like I said, when you come in, you're logged into our computer system, and our computer system tracks how much product you bought within a 24-hour period. So you can technically come back 3 times a day, but you still have that same limit in that day. So when if you come in and you purchase a product and you leave and you come back that same day to purchase another product, my system says, hey, this person's already purchased, say 14 grams, you know, he's at his limit or above his limit or whatever it is. And it physically won't allow us to go above our limit, and we're very careful with that. With that said, the limits in California are fairly high. So someone could presumably buy quite a bit at one time. And so that's something that I think the state has to look at, is what is an appropriate amount for one person to buy at one time.
As to the other question, obviously it's part of our health curriculum, but you heard about the Fast Clubs, Friday Night Live, Life of a Tiger. Those are all ways that we do outreach. And I've got to tell you, when I met with these students, I was shocked at how much knowledge they had, good knowledge. They were the ones that first talked to me about the pesticides issue with illegal grows, and that students don't know what they're putting into their system if they purchase these illegal products, which again, was most of what has been confiscated, right? I think there needs to be more, and that's a curricular issue. We can also help parents out by maybe having more of these discussions at the site level. A lot of parents who can't make it to an event like this during the day, but they do go to open house, they do go to back to school nights. I think sometimes just seeing the items, you know, that's very tangible. When you see the warheads and these things that look like candy, to me as a parent, had that been presented to me, I would have remembered that forever. You know, it's real obvious. Okay, now I know what to look for. So breaking down all these complex issues into, here's what you look for in a legal or illegal product. Here's what the vape pens can be disguised as, whether it's a thumb drive or a ballpoint pen, and you guys are seeing that, correct, Vince? You see it disguised as all kinds of things. And I think one of the things you can help us with, and this wasn't mentioned, there are stores in our community who sell the paraphernalia, and probably shouldn't be, and I think some of it is probably illegal. And if you see that, you might mention to the store owner, you know what, as long as you got this here, I'm not coming back. I don't want my kids buying this stuff. So that's a way that I think all of us can get involved. I'm going to give the last question here to Chi-Chi, and then again, I thank everybody for being here.
All right, thank you so much. This is really, truly informative. And personally, I would like to thank our superintendent and all the teachers and principals that are in here this morning. It's not easy. Most importantly, I would like to thank our student panelists. Please give them a round of applause. As one of your resource member, I would really like to make myself available to always have my door open for you to reach out to me, and we can have more of this discussion. I'm truly impressed by each and every one of your knowledge. As a parent, I have a 15-year-old as one of your members, but I have never seen most of those items on the table that I saw this morning. Can you imagine for those parents that are intimidated by their own children? And I like their advice, don't yell at them, don't scream at them. But one thing I would like you to do, you students, if you ever see any of this, do not hesitate to reach out to teachers. You are not a snitch. Rather, you are helping them change their lives. Because if you can take something and black out and can't even remember who your friend is, that is a problem. This morning, my daughter had a poster that said, my brain is not fully grown until I'm 25, right? and she made that poster herself. So I would like to see more of you be leaders in the community. That means we can go out together and educate our community members. Last year, this room was packed. I'm really a little bit disappointed this morning, but I think we can do better than this. We need to bring more parents out to support your students. And for each and every one of you, be proud. Be proud of your accomplishment and be proud for taking the time to research and to learn issues that you can help other students. So as a parent and as your representative, I will always be available to help you. Don't be shy to ask for help, and that's why we are here. And we're here for each and every one of you. Thank you.
Two last items before we go. What Ms. Jack just described is our initiative, United Patterson. Our goal with United Patterson is to bring the community together in support of our students. If you're able to get involved with United Patterson, I'd ask you to stick around and see Johnny here in the back, Johnny Padilla. But if you look at who's here today, we have representatives from our county school board, we have students, we have parents, we have administrators, we have law enforcement. It is about all of us working together as a united community to support our students. The second thing I'd like to do is just kind of an informal survey. Again, as was mentioned, we did have a little larger crowd last year for last year's event. So I'd like to ask how you heard about this. So if you can just raise your hand for each that applies. How many of you heard about this through personal contact with your school principal or a teacher? They told you about it. Good. So that's one way that we think is an effective way to communicate. How many of you saw it on Facebook or district or school Facebook? Okay. How many of you got an email invitation? All right. And how many of you heard it through word of mouth, either from a parent, another parent that you know, or a neighbor or a community member? Good. So again, we live in this age of instant communication, but sometimes the personal outreach, I think we just have to use multiple ways to communicate and continue to get that message out. So we thank you for being here. If you're interested in being part of our United Patterson Committee, please see Mr. Padilla before we go. And how about one more round of applause for our students and panelists? Thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you, and have a great weekend.